The hardest thing a man can learn is that he has become an option in the life of the child he built his whole existence around. Nobody warns you about that. They warn you about the sleepless nights, the tuition bills, the day she drives off alone for the first time, and you stand in the driveway pretending you are not counting the seconds until her taillights disappear. Nobody warns you that one December afternoon, in the cab of a work truck with the heater blowing warm air across your boots, you will hear a small silence on the other end of a phone call, and understand, in the space of a single breath, that you have been quietly demoted from father to inconvenience. For 30 years I believed my job was to pour a foundation so deep and so level that nothing on this earth could crack it. I believed that if I worked hard enough, paid enough, stayed quiet enough, then the people standing on that foundation would always know it was there. But a foundation is invisible. Nobody admires it, nobody photographs it. People fall in love with the penthouse, and they never once think about the concrete holding it out of the mud. It took a freezing Christmas Eve, a lake-effect blizzard that shut down half of Erie County, and a live television camera, glowing red against falling snow, for me to finally understand something I should have learned decades earlier. Respect is not something you beg for. It is not something you purchase in installments. It is something you walk away to find. Welcome to my channel. If you have ever poured everything you had into the people you love, only to watch them set you aside the moment somebody wealthier or louder walked into the room, then you already know exactly what that hollow feeling in the chest is like. Before I tell you how one night changed everything between my daughter and me, take a second to hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like and drop a comment below, letting me know where you are watching from. I read every single one, and your support is what keeps this channel going. Now let me tell you about the coldest week of my life and the strange, quiet gift it left behind. To understand why that night happened the way it did, you first have to understand Earl Whitcomb. Earl lives on Birch Hollow Road in Hamburg, New York, in a small faded yellow house with a wraparound porch that has seen better decades. He is 72 years old, a retired Erie County road worker who spent 40 winters clearing snow off Route 20A and patching potholes with his bare hands in weather that would send most men indoors before noon. His knuckles have swollen into shapes that no longer resemble knuckles. Arthritis has turned his hands into gnarled oak roots, curled permanently around tools that are no longer there. And every single day of his retirement, Earl Whitcomb is doing something for somebody else. He runs a volunteer operation out of an old brick warehouse near the rail yard south of town. He calls it the Lakeshore Community Wood Bank, which is a grand name for what is essentially one old man, a chainsaw, and a stubborn refusal to let his neighbors freeze. He collects fallen timber after storms, splits it by hand because he cannot afford a hydraulic splitter, and hauls it out to elderly folks scattered across the county who still heat their homes with wood stoves because that is all they have ever been able to afford. On Tuesdays, he cooks a 15-gallon pot of beef stew in the warehouse and leaves the door propped open for anyone who wants a hot meal and does not want to explain why. Earl has never asked a single person for a dime. He drives a rusted 1998 Chevy S10 that whines like a wounded animal when it shifts into second gear. He wears the same canvas coat he has worn for 20 years, with a strip of duct tape along the left sleeve, where he caught it on a fence in 2009. He is the kind of man who shows up when the world is at its coldest, and who never once mentions afterward that he was there. My name is Daniel Rourke. I am 52 years old and I run a small commercial drywall and framing outfit out of a shop on Commerce Parkway. I have spent my life working 12-hour days and coming home with gypsum dust in my hair and in the creases of my neck, with hands so calloused that I can pick up a hot pan without flinching. I am not a complicated man. I am reasonably good at hanging board, reasonably good at reading a set of prints, and until very recently, I was catastrophically bad at knowing my own worth. If I have one honest flaw, it is this. I have always tried to buy peace. I learned that habit young, and I learned it from watching my father. My father was a machinist at a plant down in Lackawanna, a heavy, silent man who came home smelling of cutting oil and never once raised his voice inside our house. Not because he was gentle, because he had decided, somewhere long before I was born, that the price of quiet was worth whatever it cost him. My mother had a temper that could strip paint, and my father simply absorbed it. He gave up the truck he wanted. He gave up the fishing trips, He gave up his opinion on where we lived, what we ate, what church we sat in on Sunday mornings. He paid and paid and paid, and in exchange he got a house where nobody yelled at him directly. I remember being about 11, sitting on the back steps while he cleaned a carburetor in the driveway, and asking him why he never argued back. He did not look up. He just wiped his hands on a rag and said, "Because arguing costs more than giving in, Danny." He died at 61 in a recliner, watching a baseball game with the sound off. And at his funeral I watched my mother accept condolences from people who spoke about him, as though he had been a piece of furniture in his own life. Pleasant, reliable, present. Nobody said he was strong. Nobody said he was missed in the particular specific way that a person is missed. They said he was easy to be around. I swore I would never be that man. And then I spent 30 years becoming him, one small surrender at a time. When my wife Diane left me 5 years ago for a man named Gordon Sanders, I did not fight. That sentence sounds noble when you say it out loud. It is not. It is the single most expensive decision I have ever made, and I made it because fighting frightened me more than losing did. Gordon Sanders is a senior partner at a regional investment firm with offices overlooking the water in downtown Buffalo. He wears tailored charcoal suits that fit him the way a good drywall job fits a wall, seamless and expensive and impossible to look away from. He drives a black BMW he has washed twice a week even in January, which anyone who has lived through a western New York winter will tell you is a form of religious devotion. He speaks in a low-level, unhurried voice that makes you feel like you are being audited even when he is asking you to pass the salt. I want to be fair to Gordon, because fairness is the only weapon I have left that I am proud of. He is not a monster. He is something more ordinary and more corrosive than that. Gordon Sanders is a man who has spent his entire adult life terrified that somebody will look at him closely and decide he does not belong. Everything about him is a performance calibrated for an audience he has never trusted. The house in Chestnut Ridge Estates, out in Orchard Park, the club membership, the seasonal wreath on the door that a company installs and removes on scheduled dates. He does not want a family. He wants a photograph of a family, correctly lit, with everyone standing where he placed them. Diane moved into that house in Chestnut Ridge, and I let her take almost everything. The retirement account, the equity, the good vehicle. My lawyer, a decent man named Ackerman, sat across a laminate table from me and asked twice whether I understood what I was signing. I told him I did. What I actually understood was that every dollar I fought for was a dollar my daughter would watch me fight for. Chloe was 17 then. 17 is a terrible age to watch your parents dismantle a household. I did not want her caught in the middle of a tug-of-war with her arms being pulled in opposite directions. So I let go of the rope entirely and told myself it was love. So I kept quiet. I worked harder. I picked up commercial jobs I had no business bidding on, framing out office suites in medical buildings, my shoulders locked up at night, and I paid for Chloe's tuition at the State University in Fredonia, while Gordon bought her a brand new Jeep for her 19th birthday, and flew the three of them to Cabo San Lucas over spring break. I told myself the tuition mattered more. I told myself that when she was 30, she would understand which of those two things had actually cost somebody something. I thought that keeping the peace was the same thing as having peace. I was wrong. I was not keeping the peace. I was quietly funding my own erasure one semester at a time. Tuesday, December 17th, 4:15 in the afternoon. The call came while I was sitting in the cab of my Ford F-250, outside a half-finished medical office on Commerce Parkway, waiting on a lumber delivery that was already 90 minutes late. The heater was blowing warm air across my boots. The sky over Hamburg was the color of wet cement, that particular flat gray the lake pushes inland in December when it is deciding what kind of week it wants to give you. My phone buzzed against the console, and Chloe's face lit up the screen. Photograph from her high school graduation, squinting into the sun, laughing at something outside the frame. "Hey kiddo," I said. "I was just thinking about you. I picked up that smoked ham you like from the butcher down in Eden. The one with the maple glaze. It is sitting in my fridge right now, with your name on it." There was a pause on the other end. Not the ordinary pause of somebody gathering a thought. A longer one. I could hear windshield wipers scraping in the background and the muffled hum of a car in motion. "Dad," she said. Her voice was flat and prepared, the voice of someone reading from a script she had rehearsed in her head on the drive over. "About Christmas Eve, I think we need to change the plans. Change them how? I said. I set my clipboard on the passenger seat. We always do the ham on Christmas Eve, Chloe. Just you and me. Then you head over to your mom's on Christmas Day. We have done it that way for 5 years. Yeah, I know. I heard her shift in her seat. But Gordon bought tickets for all of us to go to the winter gala at the club on Christmas Eve. And then we are doing a big family dinner at the house afterward. Mom really wants me there. You can go to the gala after, I said. We can eat early, 5 o'clock. You would be out the door by 6:30. Dad, no. Her voice sharpened by a fraction of a degree. Just enough. Gordon's kids are flying in from Chicago. He is really trying to bring everyone together this year. It matters to him. And Mom's husband is going to be there, and we are all trying to make him feel like family. It is important to her. And honestly, it would just be awkward if you came by. Or if I had to split my time and leave early. Trying to make him feel like family. I have carried a lot of weight in my life. I have carried sheets of 5/8 board up 3 flights of stairs in August. I have carried my father's casket. I have never felt anything settle onto my chest the way those 7 words did in the cab of that truck. I had spent 22 years being her actual family. I was the one who sat on the bathroom floor at 3 in the morning, holding her hair back when she had the stomach flu in 4th grade. I was the one who spent 3 consecutive weekends on my back in the driveway, replacing the alternator and the brake lines on her first car, because I could not sleep knowing she was driving to school on rotors that thin. I was the one who drove 4 hours round trip to Fredonia in a February whiteout, because she called me crying about a roommate. And now a man who had known her for 5 years needed to feel like family. And the way to accomplish that was for the actual family to stay home. Chloe, I said. I kept my voice as level as I could make it, which took more out of me than any wall I have ever framed. I already bought the food. I took 3 days off work. I have not seen you since October. Dad, please do not do this. She exhaled, and the irritation in it was unmistakable, the sound a person makes when they have decided your feelings are a scheduling obstacle. It is one holiday. Gordon went way out of his way to arrange all of this. You can just do something else this year. Figure it out. Figure it out. The line went dead before I could answer. She did not say goodbye. She did not wait to hear whether I was all right. She simply hung up, and the silence inside that truck cab became total, broken only by the tick of the engine cooling and the first few flakes of snow landing on the windshield and dissolving. I sat there for 4 minutes. I know it was 4 minutes because I remember watching the clock on the dash change from 4:19 to 4:23 and thinking, with a kind of dull surprise, that the world had not stopped. I did not cry. I want to be honest about that, because I think men lie about this part. I did not cry, and that was somehow worse. What I felt was closer to the sensation of a door closing at the far end of a very long hallway, so far away that you only notice the change in air pressure. Wednesday, December 18th, 5:30 in the evening. I could not stand another hour in that house on Larkspur Lane. I had put up a small artificial tree in the corner of the living room. The weekend after Thanksgiving, the one Chloe picked out when she was 9 because it had built-in lights, and she thought that was the most sophisticated thing she had ever seen. It stood there glowing at nothing, 2 wrapped boxes underneath it, a ham in the refrigerator with a maple glaze. So I loaded 3 commercial chainsaws, a coil of log chain, and a pair of splitting mauls into the bed of the F-250, and I drove down to the Lakeshore Community Wood Bank because it was the only place I could think of where nobody would ask me how my holidays were going. Snow had started when I pulled into the lot, small dry flakes swirling in the yellow wash of the sodium light above the warehouse door. Earl was out front, wrestling heavy rounds of green ash into the bed of his Chevy. His breath came out in thick white plumes. He was leaning hard on his good leg, and I could see from 30 feet away that he had already been at it too long. "You are moving slow tonight, Earl," I said, stepping down out of the truck and pulling on my leather work gloves. Earl straightened up and wiped his forehead with the back of that taped sleeve. He gave me a tired, honest smile, the kind that does not try to convince you of anything. "The cold gets down into the marrow, Daniel, that is all." He nodded toward the truck bed. "Mrs. Callahan over on Cedar Street is down to her last 3 logs, and the service says we have a real monster coming in tomorrow night. Lake is warm, and the wind is lining up wrong. If I do not get this wood to her, she will be burning her kitchen chairs by Friday, and she will do it too, and she will never tell a soul." I did not answer him. I walked over, took the round of ash out of his hands, and set it into the truck bed like it weighed nothing, which to me it did, and to him it clearly did not. Then I went back to my truck, pulled out my big saw, and started ripping through the logs stacked along the fence line. We worked in silence for 2 hours. Earl never asked why I was standing in a snowy lot on a Wednesday night in December, instead of being wherever a man my age with a daughter is supposed to be 4 days before Christmas. He just paced himself and stacked what I cut, and let the sound of the saw do whatever work needed doing. There was a kid working with us that night too. Marcus Delaney, 17 years old, a junior at the high school, all elbows and unearned confidence. Earl had picked him up the way he picks up everything else that has been discarded. Marcus had gotten himself into some trouble in the fall. Nothing serious, the sort of trouble that a bored 17-year-old with no supervision finds by accident, and a judge had handed him community service hours. He had finished those hours in October. He kept showing up anyway. Around 8 o'clock, Marcus was struggling to get a maul through a knotted piece of oak, hacking at it from the wrong angle, getting angrier with every swing. I set my saw down and walked over. "Read the grain," I told him. I turned the round a quarter turn and pointed at the fault line running out from the center. Wood already knows where it wants to split. You are not making a decision. You are just agreeing with one that has already been made. He hit it once, and it fell open in 2 clean halves. He looked at the halves, and then at me with an expression I did not have the vocabulary for at the time. I understand it now. It was the look of a boy who had just been taught something by a grown man in an ordinary tone of voice, without being made to feel stupid for not knowing it already. "My dad would have just taken them all," he said, not bitter, just reporting a fact about the weather in his house. "Where is your dad, Marcus?" He shrugged and set another round on the block. A round, depends on the week. I did not say anything else, but I stayed near him for the rest of the night, and I noticed that he started copying the way I set my feet. When we finally stopped, near 10, Earl went to his truck cab and came back with a battered green thermos. He poured black coffee into the plastic cup and handed it to me. It tasted like scorched earth. It was also the hottest thing I had ever held. "You have the look of a man who has been evicted from his own mind," Earl said quietly, looking out at the snow filling in the tracks we had made. I took a sip and watched the steam climb. Chloe called. "I am not needed for Christmas. Gordon Sanders bought her a better life, and I guess my invitation got lost in the mail." I turned the cup in my hands. She told me to figure it out. Earl nodded slowly. He did not offer me a single cheap thing. He did not tell me she would come around, or that she did not mean it, or that time heals, or any of the other sentences people reach for when they want a conversation to end. He looked down at his own ruined hands for a while. "A man goes where he is needed, Daniel, not where he is tolerated." He said it the way you would state the freezing point of water. When my boy passed, 20 years ago now, I figured the world was finished with me. Sat in that yellow house for 11 months. Then one January, I looked around and saw how many people out here were sitting in the dark and the cold. And it turned out the world was not finished with me at all. It just needed me somewhere I had not thought to look. He gestured at my truck with his chin. "You have got a heavy plow, a strong back, and a shop full of tools. If your family does not want your time this week, I know about 40 old people in this county who pray for it every single night." I looked at Earl, then down at the steel bumper of my truck, dusted white. Something shifted in me then. I want to be precise about what it was, because it was not anger. Anger is hot and it wants an audience. This was cold and quiet and entirely private. It was the sound of a heavy door swinging shut somewhere inside my chest, and the strange relief that comes when you finally stop holding something up. I had spent 5 years trying to make myself small enough to fit into the margins of a life that had already been reformatted without me. "What time do we start?" I asked. Earl looked at me and something glinted in those old eyes. 6 in the morning. Bring the heavy chains." Thursday, December 19th. 6 in the morning. The blizzard arrived exactly when the weather service said it would, and then it did something the weather service had not said it would do. It stopped moving. Anyone who has lived along the eastern shore of Lake Erie knows the particular horror of a stalled lake effect band. The lake had not frozen over yet, so it kept feeding moisture into a wind that had lined itself up perfectly down the long axis of the water. And the band parked itself over southern Erie County and simply did not leave. By Friday morning there was better than 2 feet on the ground, and it was still coming at 3 inches an hour. A skin of ice had glazed every power line from the lakeshore up to Chestnut Ridge. The wind was running at 40 miles an hour, snapping utility poles and dropping century-old oaks across roads that the plows could no longer reach. By Friday afternoon, 80% of the county was without power. The temperature dropped to 4 degrees above zero, and with the wind it was well below that. I did not look at my phone. I left it face down on the kitchen counter, plugged into the charger, and I did not think about it. I donned my heavy Carhartt bibs, my insulated boots, and my high-visibility jacket. I loaded the bed of the F-250 with extra 5-gallon cans of diesel, 2 portable generators out of my shop, 3 cases of bottled water, and a dozen heavy wool blankets I had bought on impulse at a surplus store in October for reasons I could not have explained at the time. For the next 48 hours, the entire world contracted down to the cone of light in front of my high beams. Earl and I became a 2-man rescue crew. The county plows were overwhelmed, and half of them were stuck in drifts on the main highway themselves. But my truck had a heavy-duty steel plow on the front, 4-wheel drive, and a fresh set of studded tires I had put on in November, because I am a man who prepares for the wrong disasters. Our first stop Friday morning was Cedar Street. Mrs. Callahan is 84 years old and lives alone in a narrow blue house with a stove that is older than I am. When I carried the first armload of split oak up onto her porch, she opened the door before I knocked. Wearing 3 sweaters and holding a flashlight she did not need yet. She would not let us leave without coffee. Earl warned me. She made it on a camp stove, and it was somehow worse than his. While it heated, she stood at the counter and told me, without my asking and without a trace of self-pity, that her son lives in Charlotte and her daughter lives outside Denver, and that neither of them had called since Thanksgiving. She said it the way you might mention that the porch light was out. They are busy, she said. It is a busy time of year for young people. Her daughter is 59. I stood in that freezing kitchen with a cup of terrible coffee in my hands, looking at a woman who had raised 2 children and was now rationing firewood alone in the dark 4 days before Christmases, and telling a stranger it was fine because that was easier than saying the other thing out loud. And I understood, with a clarity that went straight through me like a nail through soft pine, that I had been looking at my own future and calling it charity. The difference between Mrs. Callahan and me was 32 years and 1 phone call. "Ma'am," I said, "you have got my number now. If that stove goes cold at 2 in the morning, you call me. Not in the morning, at 2. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she wrote it on the inside cover of a phone book, in the enormous careful handwriting of someone who learned penmanship in 1948, and she thanked me twice, and I had to go out onto the porch and stand in the wind for a second before I could get back in the truck. The hours after that ran together into one long strip of white and black. We cleared the entrance drive at the Willowbrook Senior Care Center on Ridge Road on Friday night after their backup generator failed at 11:15. I hauled my largest generator out of the truck bed with Marcus on the other end of it, ran 3 heavy-duty extension cords through a kitchen window, and got their heating fans and their refrigeration back online before the interior temperature in the east wing dropped below 50. There were 51 residents in that building. The nearest facility with capacity was in Batavia. In those conditions, an evacuation would have taken 6 hours, and I do not believe every one of them would have survived it. We did not stop to eat anything except cold ham sandwiches. That ham, as it turns out, fed 9 people over 3 days, none of whom were my daughter. We cut 2 fallen maples off Route 20A at 4 in the morning, so an ambulance out of Springville could reach a woman who had gone into labor 11 days early. I never learned her name. Earl told me later that the baby was a girl and that they got to the hospital with time to spare, and I have chosen not to check whether that is true, because I would rather keep it. We delivered dry oak to 14 families huddled around fireplaces, with nothing else between them and the weather. And somewhere in the middle of all that, on Saturday afternoon, he nearly died on a back road outside Boston Hills. It was a section of township road with a drainage cut running along the south shoulder, maybe 9 feet deep, completely invisible under the drifting. I was running the plow at maybe 12 miles an hour when the right front tire found the edge of it. The truck went over sideways faster than thought. I felt the whole passenger side drop away, felt the seatbelt lock across my chest, and the world tilted about 30 degrees and hung there. Everything stopped. The engine was still running. The wipers were still going. And I sat there at that angle, held up by nothing but the plow frame catching on the lip of the culvert, and understood with perfect calm that if that steel had folded, I would have gone in upside down into 9 feet of snow and standing water, in a truck nobody could see from the road, on a route nobody was driving, with a phone I had left on my kitchen counter. I sat in that tilted cab for what was probably 90 seconds and thought about exactly one thing. Nobody would have known to look for me. That is not self-pity, that is logistics. My daughter believed I was home. My ex-wife had not spoken to me in 14 months. My crew was off for the holidays. Earl was 3 miles east with his own truck full of wood. If that plow frame had let go, I would have been found sometime after the thaw. And the thought that came after that one surprised me so much that I said it out loud in the empty cab. Earl would have come looking. Not Chloe, not Diane. A 72-year-old man with ruined hands who I had known for 4 years, who I had never once done a favor for that he had asked for, who owed me absolutely nothing. He would have noticed I was late. He would have come. I got out through the driver's door, which took some doing, and I walked 1.25 miles through knee-deep snow to a farmhouse with a lit window, and a man named Doyle towed me out with his tractor and would not take $1 for it. I was back on the road inside of 2 hours, but something had rearranged itself in me during that 1.25 miles, and it never rearranged back. By the time Saturday night arrived, Christmas Eve, I was running on adrenaline and Earl's terrible coffee. My face was chapped raw. My lower back had gone from pain into a kind of numb hum. I had slept 5 hours in 3 days, and my mind had never in my entire life been that clear. I was not thinking about the winter gala at the club. I was not thinking about the house in Chestnut Ridge, or Gordon's suits, or the 7 words my daughter had used on the phone Tuesday afternoon. I was entirely, completely present in the work. There is a kind of peace available to a man who is doing something that unambiguously needs doing, and I had not tasted it in 5 years, and I had forgotten that it existed. At 11:30 on Christmas Eve, a news van from WKBF Channel 4 buried itself in a drift at the intersection of Lakeshore and Cedar. They had been shadowing the county emergency vehicles all evening, trying to put together a live segment about the outages. And they had made the mistake every out-of-town crew makes, which is to assume that a road looks the way it looks. The van was in up to the rocker panels, with the rear wheels spinning uselessly and throwing rooster tails of snow. Earl and I pulled up behind them. I hooked a heavy yellow tow strap to their frame rail, put the F-250 in low, and eased them out of that drift so gently that the cameraman standing beside the van did not even have to shift his feet. The reporter came running over to my window with the camera operator right behind her. The red light on top of the camera was glowing hard against the falling snow. She was young, maybe 30, and she was wearing a station-issued parka that was not remotely adequate for what was happening outside. "We are live on Channel 4, she said into her microphone, teeth chattering audibly. "I am standing here with 2 local residents who have spent the last 2 days clearing roads, delivering emergency power, and reaching stranded residents while county infrastructure is effectively crippled. Sir, can you tell us your name? And what brings you out here in these conditions on Christmas Eve?" I rolled the window all the way down. The cold came in against my face, honest and clean. I did not look at the camera. I have thought about that a great deal since. If I had looked at the camera, it would have been a performance, and everything that happened afterward would have been something I did to somebody. I looked at the reporter because she was the person who had asked me a question. "My name is Daniel Rourke," I said. My voice came out lower and more tired than I expected. "And this is Earl Whitcomb. He is the one who has been doing this for 20 years. I have only been doing it since Wednesday." Earl made a small noise of protest from the passenger seat, and I ignored it. "We are out here because there are people who need somebody. That is really all there is to it. A man is supposed to go where he is needed. When the world gets cold, you do not stay inside and take care of yourself. You show up for the folks who do not have anybody else." The reporter, whose name I learned later was Nicole Bishop, looked genuinely moved and not in the practiced way. "Mr. Rourke, the County Emergency Management Office confirmed about an hour ago that you kept the Willowbrook Senior Care Center from having to evacuate 51 residents last night. In these temperatures, that could have been catastrophic." She hesitated. "Do you have family at home waiting for you tonight?" I let out a short breath that turned to mist in the air between us. I want to be very clear about this, because it became the entire argument later. I was not angry when I answered. I did not calculate it. I was 52 years old, 41 hours into a blizzard, and I simply did not have the energy left to construct a comfortable lie for a stranger. My family made other plans for the holidays, I said. They had a dinner to get to, so I had some free time. That was it, 9 words and a shrug. Merry Christmas to everybody out there. Stay warm. Check on your neighbors, especially the old ones. They will not call you. I rolled the window up, put the truck in drive, and dropped the plow blade back down onto the asphalt. We had 3 more houses to check before midnight, and I did not think about that exchange again for the next hour and 10 minutes. Sunday, December 25th, 12:15 in the morning. We got back to the warehouse a little after midnight and parked the equipment. Marcus had fallen asleep sitting upright against a stack of pallets, and I drove him home to a dark house on the north side of town, where no porch light was on and no window was lit. He thanked me twice on the ride and apologized once for nothing at all. Then I dropped Earl at his yellow house on Birch Hollow. He shook my hand, and his grip was startling. All that ruin in the joints and still enough left in it to mean something. "You did good work, Daniel," he said. "Go home and sleep." I walked into my kitchen at 12:45 in the morning. The house was cold, maybe 50 degrees, but the power had flickered back on somewhere in the last hour, and the furnace was groaning its way back to life. I pulled off my boots and left them by the door with my wet jacket, and I walked to the counter and picked up my phone. The screen lit up. 38 missed calls. 24 from Chloe, 12 from Diane, 2 from an unknown number I later learned was Gordon's personal cell, which he had never once given me in 5 years. Dozens of text messages stacked and unread. I sat down at the small kitchen table. The wood was cold through my jeans. I did not have time to open a single message before the phone started vibrating in my hand again. Chloe. I slid the bar across. "Hello, Chloe. Dad." Her voice came through and it was shaking. It was not the flat, prepared, faintly irritated voice from Tuesday afternoon. It was small and fast and completely disoriented. "Dad, oh my God, are you okay? Where are you?" "I am in my kitchen," I said. My voice was completely level, and I did not have to work for it, which surprised me. "Just got in." "Dad, why are you on the news?" I could hear noise behind her. Diane's voice pitched high somewhere in another room. Gordon, sounding loud and clipped in a way I had never heard from him, a man whose entire personality is built on never raising his voice, raising it. The power came back on about 40 minutes ago, and Gordon turned on the TV to check the roads, and you were just there. On the screen, they ran the clip 3 times. "They are calling you the Christmas Eve Guardian, Dad." The county emergency management director gave a statement, and he thanked you and some man named Earl by name. "Earl Whitcomb," I said. "He is a good man. We were clearing roads." "But Dad," her voice caught, and I heard something in it that was not quite crying yet. "You told the reporter. You said your family made other plans. You said we did not need you." I did not say anything. "Do you have any idea how that looked?" she said, and there it was, the thing itself arriving 3 sentences into the conversation instead of 30. Gordon's phone has not stopped ringing. People from the club, his partners, half of Chestnut Ridge. They are all asking why his stepdaughter's father was out in a blizzard with a chainsaw while Gordon was hosting a catered dinner. Someone posted the clip in the neighborhood group. They are saying, "It looks like we left you out there to freeze." I looked out the kitchen window at the snow drifting up against my old wooden fence, blue and clean under the yard light. And the realization came to me then, complete and quiet and without any drama at all. She had not asked if I was warm. She had not asked if I had eaten. She had not asked what 48 hours in a stalled lake effect band does to a 52-year-old man's back, or whether I had been anywhere near the culvert on that township road. She had asked me why I was on the news. She was not frightened for me. She was frightened of what I had accidentally revealed. "Chloe," I said. My voice did not rise. It did not need to. I did not say you abandoned me to freeze. I told a reporter the exact truth. You told me not to come because Gordon's family would be there, and you wanted him to feel like family. You told me to figure it out, so I figured it out. But you did not have to say it on television. It came out of her almost as a wail. Gordon planned this whole thing. He spent thousands of dollars. There were 40 people at that dinner. And now the only thing anybody is talking about is how his family left you out in a storm. Mom is upstairs crying because her friends keep texting her asking what happened. Then tell them the truth, Chloe, I said quietly. Tell them you chose to spend the evening with the man who bought you a Jeep. And I chose to spend mine with people who needed their heat turned back on. There is no lie anywhere in that. There was a silence on her end that went on long enough that I could hear the wind against her side of the house. Dad, please, she whispered. And for the first time in 5 years, I heard something in my daughter's voice that was not management, not strategy, something raw and about 9 years old. Please. And here is the part I have not told many people. Behind her, somewhere back in that big cold house, I heard Diane crying. Not the theatrical crying I had heard in the last 2 years of our marriage, the kind deployed to end a discussion. The other kind. The kind that comes out of a person sideways in pieces, when they have run out of ways to hold something together. 26 years of my life were in that sound. I knew the shape of it. I knew what her face looked like when she made it. My hand actually moved toward my truck keys on the table. I felt my body start to stand up. I want to be honest about that moment, because I think if I pretend it did not happen, then everything after it is worth less. I was not cold. I was not free of them. Every reflex I had built over 3 decades was screaming at me to get in that truck and fix it, because fixing it was the only role I had ever been given, and I was very, very good at it. I sat back down. Dad, the generator Gordon put in last spring quit 2 hours into the storm, she said, and the words started tumbling now. The pipes in the basement burst around 8. The whole lower level is flooded, and it is already freezing down there. We have been sitting around the gas fireplace in the great room all night, with coats on. Gordon will not let the neighbors come over, because he does not want anybody to see the mess, and he is furious. Dad, can you bring one of the big commercial generators over? And the plow? The driveway is completely blocked by a drift. We cannot get the Jeep out. We are stuck here. I sat in that quiet kitchen with the furnace ticking, and the snow coming down blue outside the window. 5 years ago, I would have been in the truck before she finished the sentence. 2 weeks ago, I would have been. I would have driven through those drifts, hooked up the generator, cleared that driveway down to bare asphalt, patched the pipes if I could reach them, and then stood in Gordon Sanders' great room, in wet Carhartts feeling grateful for whatever crumb of appreciation came my way. I would have bought the peace. It was the only currency I had ever known how to spend, but that man was gone. He had died somewhere out on a township road outside Boston Hills, sitting sideways in a tilted truck cab at 4 in the afternoon, doing the arithmetic on who would have come looking for him. No, Chloe, I said. I cannot do that. What? The disbelief in it was total. Why, Dad, we are freezing in here. You have the equipment sitting right there in your truck. My equipment belongs to the community wood bank tonight, I said. There are people in this county who are 84 years old and heating one room with a wood stove. That is where it goes. I paused, and honestly, Chloe, Gordon is a very wealthy man. He is a senior partner at an investment firm. He has a house in Chestnut Ridge and a car that has never once seen a gravel road. I am sure he can figure it out. I let that sit for exactly 1 second. That is what you told me to do, is it not? Dad, how can you be like this? She gasped. It is Christmas. It is Christmas, I agreed. And I spent my Christmas Eve making sure 51 elderly people in a care facility on Ridge Road did not have to be evacuated into 4-degree weather at 2 in the morning. I went where I was needed. I looked at the little artificial tree glowing in the corner of the next room, at the 2 wrapped boxes underneath it that had been sitting there since the first week of December. I am not needed at Gordon's house, Chloe. I am only convenient there when the power goes out. There is an enormous difference between those 2 things, and it took me 52 years and a blizzard to learn it. So you are just going to leave us here. Gordon is your family now. You have spent 3 years making sure he felt like it. Let him take care of you. I did not wait to hear what she would say to that. I pressed the red circle on the screen. Then I turned the phone all the way off, set it face down on the counter, and walked into my bedroom and slept for 11 hours. Wednesday, December 26th, 8 in the morning. The sun came up over Erie County the way it only does after a storm of that size has scoured everything out of the sky. Blinding white ground, brilliant honest blue overhead, not a particle of haze anywhere, the kind of light that makes you feel personally forgiven for something. I came downstairs, made a pot of real coffee, and sat by the window with it. Then I turned my phone back on. More messages, most of them from Diane, and most of those informing me that I was selfish, that I had humiliated the family, that I had always been passive-aggressive and had finally found an audience for it. One long rambling paragraph from Chloe that started as an apology and completed its turn into a defense of why she had needed to stay at Gordon's somewhere around the fourth sentence. I read all of them. I did not answer any of them, and here is what surprised me. I did not feel angry. I did not feel that hot flush of vindication I would have expected. The one people promise you is waiting on the other side of standing up for yourself. I felt space. That is the only word for it. My life had suddenly become very quiet and very clean, like a room after the furniture has been carried out. There was a great deal of air in it. I sat in that air and drank my coffee and watched the light move across the snow in the backyard, and I did not reach for anything to fill it. Around 10, I drove down to Birch Hollow Road. The county plows had finally caught up, and the roads were mostly passable, banked 8 feet high on either side. Earl was out on the porch in an old green folding chair, with a wool blanket across his lap, watching the sun hit the snow the way other men watch television. I came up the steps carrying a plate of the smoked ham from the butcher in Eden, glazed and warmed and covered in foil. "Thought you might want some breakfast, Earl." He looked at the plate, then up at me, and he smiled, those old eyes crinkling all the way closed. "The Christmas Eve Guardian brings ham," he said. "I must be doing something right. Do not start." I laughed and sat down on the top step, letting the cold morning air work on my face, and we stayed there a long while without saying much of anything, watching the smoke rise from a chimney down the block. The thing about a story like that is that you do not get to decide when it is over. Nicole Bishop called the shop on the 2nd of January. She wanted to do a follow-up piece, and I told her no. I told her that Earl had been doing this for 2 decades without a camera, and that the last thing either of us needed was to become a segment. She was polite about it, and she called back 2 days later and asked a different question, which is how you can tell somebody is good at their job. "What if the piece is not about you?" she said. "What if it is about the wood bank?" I drove down to Birch Hollow and put it to Earl, expecting him to run me off the porch. He was quiet for a long moment, working his thumb across a knuckle that would not straighten. "How many cords did we put out last year?" he asked. "Around 90. How many folks on the list that we did not get to?" I did not answer, because he knew the number as well as I did. 31 names. 31 households in Erie County that had asked an old man for firewood and had been told gently that he would try. "Then let her come," Earl said. The piece ran on a Thursday evening in the middle of January. 6 minutes, which in local news is close to an eternity. Nicole shot most of it inside the warehouse, and she was smart enough to keep her voice out of it and let Earl talk. He stood in front of that scarred old splitting block in his taped coat and explained, in the flattest possible tone, how a woman in her 80s makes the decision to burn a kitchen chair, and what the arithmetic of that decision looks like when the power has been out for 3 days. She showed the list on the wall. She showed the 31 names with nothing checked next to them. And she did not editorialize about it for 1 second, because she did not have to. They put a link at the bottom of the screen for 11 seconds. By Saturday morning, the wood bank had received $19,000. By the end of that month, it was past 40. A tree service out of West Seneca donated a commercial hydraulic splitter, the kind that does in 8 seconds what took Earl 4 minutes and cost him a joint at a time. A propane company started covering the fuel. The high school shop teacher started bringing students out on Saturdays for credit, and Marcus Delaney, 17 years old and formerly in possession of court-ordered community service hours, found himself teaching them how to read the grain. The 31 names on that wall were all checked off before the 1st of March. I watched Earl the day the splitter was delivered. He stood in the lot with his hands in his coat pockets and looked at that machine for a long time without saying a word. And I understood that he was doing a private piece of arithmetic of his own, calculating how many more winters he could stay in this fight now. 20 years, he finally said. 20 years I have been asking this town for help. He nodded slowly, still looking at the machine. Turns out I was asking. I should have been showing. I have thought about that sentence more than almost anything else anybody said to me that winter. Because the truth is, I did not save that wood bank. I did not raise $40,000. All I did was answer a question honestly on a night when I was too tired to lie, and it happened that a camera was running. The town did the rest. The town had always been willing to do the rest. Nobody had ever simply told them what was happening 3 miles down the road in the dark. Chloe came to my house on the 11th of February. There was no warning, no text. I was in the garage on a Saturday afternoon with the door up and a space heater running, rebuilding the carburetor on a generator that had been coughing, and I heard a car pull into the driveway and stop. The Jeep. Of course it was the Jeep. She got out and stood at the end of the drive with her hands pushed into her coat pockets, and she did not come any closer, and neither of us said anything for a while. She looked older. That is a strange thing to notice on a 22-year-old across 8 weeks, but she did. "Hi, Dad." "Chloe. Can I come in?" I set the carburetor down on the workbench and wiped my hands on a rag, and I want you to understand that everything in me wanted to say yes immediately. Wanted to say, of course, you never have to ask, this is your house. That sentence was already fully formed and sitting behind my teeth. I did not say it. "Come in and sit down," I said instead. "There is coffee." She sat at the same small kitchen table where I had taken her call on Christmas morning. I poured 2 cups, and then I did something I had never done in 22 years of being her father, which was to sit down across from my own daughter and simply wait. I did not fill the silence. I did not ask about school. I did not ask if she was warm enough or eating or whether the Jeep needed its oil changed. I did not smooth the road out in front of her, the way I had been smoothing roads for her since she was born. I just drank my coffee and let her find her own way there. It took her a long time, 4 minutes maybe. About the same length of time I had spent in that truck cab in December, which I do not think either of us noticed. "They ran the follow-up piece," she said finally, "about the wood bank. Somebody in my program sent it to me. They did not know it was you." She turned her cup a quarter turn on the table. "I have watched it maybe 9 times. I did not say anything. Gordon and Mom are separating," she said. I set my cup down. "It has nothing to do with Christmas," she said quickly. "It was already happening. Christmas just made it impossible for everyone to keep pretending." She was quiet for a second. "The night the basement flooded, he screamed at her for 45 minutes. Not about the pipes, about the neighborhood group, about how she had made him look. He was standing in 6 inches of water in his own house, screaming at her about a Facebook post. She looked up at me, and I sat on the stairs and I thought, that is exactly what I did to you. On the phone, word for word, that is the exact same thing, and I could not stop thinking it. The furnace came on. Outside, somebody 2 doors down was running a snowblower. "Dad, I am not going to sit here and tell you. I did not know what I was doing," she said. "That is what I came here to say. I have been drafting a version where I did not know, where I was young and I was caught in the middle, and I did not understand what I was choosing." She shook her head slowly. "I knew. I was 22 years old, and I knew exactly what I was doing. I had a choice between the person who was always going to be there and the person who might not be, and I picked the one who might leave because he was the one I had to keep earning. And you were free." She said the last 3 words very carefully. "I treated you like you were free." I have replayed this next part many times, and I am still not certain I handled it correctly. But I will tell you what I actually said. "Chloe, I am going to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you answer. I forgive you. That part is not complicated, and I am not going to make you work for it. You are my daughter. I have forgiven you for that phone call every single day since the day it happened, and I would have forgiven you if you had never come here at all. But forgiving you and going back are 2 different things, and I am not going back." She started to speak. I lifted a hand, and she stopped. "Here is what I mean by that. For 22 years, I was the one who called. I was the one who drove. I was the one who showed up in February in a whiteout because you needed me at 10 at night. And I never once asked you to meet me halfway because I was afraid that if I asked, you would count the cost and decide it was too high. So I never gave you the chance to choose me. I just kept showing up so relentlessly that choosing me was never necessary. I looked at my hands on the table, the same shape as my father's, headed the same direction. That was not love, Chloe. Some of it was love, but a lot of it was fear wearing love's coat. And it did not do you any favors because it taught you that I was weather. Something that happens whether you participate or not." Her eyes were wet, but she did not look away, and I was proud of her for that in a way I could not have explained. "So I am not going to do that anymore. I am not going to call 3 times to your once. I am not going to drive 4 hours because you had a hard week unless you have also driven some part of the way. I am going to be here. And I am going to answer the phone every single time it rings. And I am going to love you exactly as much as I always have. But you are going to have to show up for it now, like anybody else, like an adult. That is the only version of this I have left in me." She was quiet for a long moment. "That is fair," she said. "It is not generous," I said. "I know that." "No." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, roughly, the same way she did when she was 6. "It is fair. Generous is what got us here." We sat with that. Then she looked at the carburetor parts spread out on newspaper on the counter where I had carried them in from the cold, and she said, "What is wrong with it? Float is sticking. It is flooding out under load. Can I watch?" And that is how my daughter and I spent the afternoon of February 11th, not repairing anything between us. Just sitting at a kitchen table in Hamburg, New York, with a disassembled Briggs and Stratton carburetor between us, while I explained what a float bowl does, and she asked reasonably intelligent questions, and neither of us said anything important for 3 hours. It was the best afternoon I had had in 5 years. She comes now about twice a month. She calls on Sundays, mostly. Sometimes she does not, and I do not call to find out why. And that is the hardest and most necessary thing I have ever done as a father. In April, she drove out to the wood bank on her own, without telling me, and spent a Saturday stacking cord with Marcus Delaney and a half-dozen high school kids. I found out from Earl a week later. I did not mention it to her. She did not mention it to me. But I knew what it was. She was driving part of the way. Earl Whitcomb turned 73 in June. We had the party at the warehouse, which is a sentence I would not have believed 18 months ago. 60 people came. Mrs. Callahan made a cake that was structurally alarming and tasted extraordinary, and Marcus Delaney, who had by then been accepted into a 2-year program in diesel technology, gave a speech that went on far too long and made an old man cry in front of everybody. I want to spend a moment on what I have actually learned from all of this. Because a story about a man who refused to bring a generator to his ex-wife's house on Christmas is not worth 6 months of your algorithm unless there is something in it you can use. The first thing is this. There is a difference between being needed and being convenient, and almost every exhausted, unappreciated person I have ever met has confused the two. Being needed means that your absence would change something. Being convenient means that your presence saves somebody an inconvenience. They feel identical from the inside, because both of them involve you working very hard for somebody you love. The way you tell them apart is by watching what happens when you are not available. If a person's first reaction to your unavailability is worry about you, you are needed. If their first reaction is irritation about the inconvenience, you have your answer, and you have probably had it for years. I did not want that answer. I avoided it for 5 years by never once being unavailable. The second thing is about boundaries, which is a word I did not have much use for before that winter, because it sounded to me like something from a magazine. Here is what I have come to understand. A boundary is not a punishment, and it is not a weapon. When I told Chloe I would not bring the generator, I was not punishing her. If I had wanted to punish her, I would have brought it and made certain she felt the weight of every minute. That is what my father would have done, and what I had done for years, in 100 small deniable ways. Sighing, mentioning the drive, being tired out loud. A boundary is just an honest statement of where you actually are. It says, this is what I have and this is what I do not have, and I am done pretending otherwise. It is not cruelty, it is the end of a lie. And the strangest part, the part nobody warned me about, is that the boundary was the first genuine gift I had given my daughter in a decade. As long as I was infinitely available, she never had to become a person who shows up. She could not. There was never any room for her to. I had occupied the entire space of that relationship with my own frantic usefulness, and then I resented her for standing in the only place I had left her. The third thing is about older people, and I am going to ask something of you here. There are people within 2 miles of wherever you are sitting right now who will not call anybody. Not because they are proud, though some are, because they have already done the arithmetic on how much of an imposition they are. And they have decided the answer is too much. Mrs. Callahan had my number written inside the cover of a phone book for 11 weeks before she used it. When she finally did, in the middle of February, it was because her stove had gone cold at 1 in the morning, and she had been sitting in a chair in her coat since 11, deciding whether it was serious enough to bother a man about. She had been sitting in the cold for 2 hours running a cost-benefit analysis on her own survival. Somebody's mother is doing that tonight. Somebody's father, possibly yours. They will not call. The mechanism of aging in this country is that the people who most need help are the people least willing to ask for it, and we have built a culture that quietly relies on their unwillingness. Go knock on the door, do not text, knock the last thing, and then I will let you go. I lost something that winter. I want to be honest about that, because I do not think these stories should end with everybody getting everything back. My relationship with my daughter is not what it was. It will never be what it was. And what it was is not something I want restored, because what it was nearly finished me. It is smaller now, and it is real. Twice a month and a phone call on most Sundays. Built out of two people who both have to make an effort, on a foundation neither of us can see, but both of us know is there. And I found something I did not know was available to a man my age, which is a life that is not organized around being useful to people who have stopped noticing. I am 53 now. I still hang drywall. My back is worse and my hearing is going in the left ear from 30 years of compressors. On Tuesdays I go down to the warehouse and I make the stew, because Earl's hands cannot manage the pot anymore, and neither of us has ever once said that out loud. A man's worth is not measured by the titles he is given, or the bloodlines he defends, or the amount of himself he is willing to hand over to keep a room quiet. It is measured by his willingness to stand in the cold when everybody else is running for the fire. I thought I had lost a daughter that December. What I had actually lost was a version of myself who believed he had to purchase his own place at a table he had built with his own hands. And what I found, out there on those dark roads in the worst storm this county has seen in 40 years, was an entire town that knew exactly who I was the moment the lights went out. For the first time in my life, that was more than enough. Thank you for staying with me through this story. It means a great deal to have a community of people who understand what it costs to finally stand your ground, especially when standing your ground looks, from the outside, like walking away. If this story reminded you of a season in your own life when you had to learn your own worth, or if you have ever had to step back from people who treated you as an option instead of a person, please leave a comment below and tell me about it. I read every single one. Give this video a like if it reached you, and subscribe to my channel so you never miss another story of quiet justice. And if there is somebody in your life you have not checked on in a while, an older neighbor, a parent, somebody who would never in 1,000 years call you first, then close this video right now and go knock on their door. That is worth more than anything I have said here. Stay strong, stay honest, and go where you are needed. Every story on this channel is written, structured, and narrated by a real person who has lived enough winters to know what the cold feels like. Names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect the privacy of everyone involved, and certain events have been compressed or reordered for the sake of telling a coherent story in a single sitting. But the emotional truth of it, the phone call, the silence in the truck, the moment you realize you have become optional in your own child's life, is not invented, and it is not generated by a machine. It is drawn from real experience, mine, and that of the many people who have written to me over the years. I read those letters. They are the reason this channel exists. Thank you for trusting me with your time. Take care of yourselves out there.